Hey there, CS360 students. So in this recording, we're going to learn how to connect to a web API and get access to information and pull it into our Android application. So if you're unfamiliar with what a REST API is, REST stands for Representational State Transfer. And it is a popular way of providing access to information using CRUD, create, read, update, and delete operations through a web interface. And so the idea here is there is a web server that contains information, and it provides way of getting subjects and then passing back all the subjects. Provides a way of getting questions for a particular topic, and then it returns them back. So REST API is a very popular way of transferring data from a web server to a client. And they actually have a web server that we'll be able to use here. They provide us links right here that will provide us subjects as well as questions for a particular subject. Now, the format that this REST API is providing is using what's called JSON, or JavaScript Object Notation. JSON has really replaced XML data return in modern APIs. And what you're getting back here is a key value pair with either with an array of objects right here. So under the covers, we could turn this JSON back into an object, and most modern programming languages have built-in ways to turn that JSON into objects. Again, you can go ahead and copy these links right here, and you can see that right here I've gone ahead and I've just typed it into the browser, and if I press enter, it makes a call to their endpoint, and it is giving back all of the information there. I don't know what else. Is there a questions one here? Let's see. Nope, so they return back an error that does not work, but I can get the subjects. So it looks like these are probably the, we gotta see what this one has. This has got underwater basket weaving. Let's go see what questions we get for that. So you can see I did psychology earlier, but I didn't see the underwater basket weaving. There it is. It is an interesting subject. So this is a perfect example of we are hitting their REST API to get access to information. All right, so continuing on, to access a REST API, there's a couple implementations. One is called Volley. It's an HTTP library that you need to include an implementation, and then also you need to have permission to use the internet. So that's one implementation. There's another one called Retrofit, and I will be honest, this is the one that I use in my own personal application. So I'll actually show you both implementations. We'll do the Volley one here first. Oh, by the way, these are going to be asynchronous task calls. So when you do an asynchronous task call, you do not know when that result is going to come back. So typically what you do is you send off the call and then you wait for the response to come back. So you have to make sure that you handle the results properly. So if you have things that are in a particular order that need to happen, you're going to need to wait until all of those pieces are back. Volley, as it says here, uses several objects to interact with the web API. So it's going to have a request queue, a JSON object request, and then remember I just said that listener, it's going to have a response callback for when it gets information back. And then it's going to have a JSON object, the key value pairs data, and then an error listener as well. So the idea works like this. Once we have Volley incorporated into the project, we're going to make a request. We're going to have to get the application context. Here's the URL that we're going to hit. And then they're going to make a request. It goes like this. They're going to make a JSON object request. It's a GET call. They're going to pass that URL. I don't know what the null pointer, the null reference is for. It must not be needed. And then we're going to provide a new listener where we can wait for the response to come back. We also provide an error listener. So if we get a successful response back, we will be right here. And then you can see here, they're just going to log the information. In an error listener situation, again, they're going to log that information. Over in the study fetcher, so they're going to create a class that is going to call the make the request. So you can see here, let me find the where is, oh, here it is. Here's our fetch questions. Here's where we're going to make our API call. They're going to create a URL with the base URL, so that's going to be defined up here as a constant. Right there it is. So we have our base URL. We're going to add to it the type, which is questions. We're going to add the subject, which is whatever subject we are searching for. Again, we can see how we make the call. We create a request object. We pass get the URL, and then we provide a listener that will handle the response. So eventually, when we get our response back here, we're going to have our listener called the on questions received method. If it comes back as an error, we're going to call the listener's on error response method. And so let's find our listener. The on question, oh, sorry, that's going to be in the next class, excuse me. Oh, by the way, we have the ability to parse that JSON. So we're going to get JSON object back. So the code in here is going to turn that JSON into an object that we can actually work with. Scrolling down, this is going to call that study fetcher on study data received listener. So this is going to be the listener handler. And so that is implemented right here on questions received. So this is the callback once it comes back that we are going to then check to see, did we get something back? If so, then we're going to add it to the database. And then if it's an error response, that gets handled right here. So again, I do have the code implemented in our runnable. So to do that, you're going to have to go to the Android manifest, and they didn't really hook this up separately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncomment out this import activity and then scroll down, and the subject activity here is going to get commented out. You can see that it is the main method, and we're going to change it to be the import activity right here. So when we run this, this is going to start back up with the import activity. And again, they have a activity UI for this. And there we go. I'm gonna say it's taking a little time to run there. So when this starts up, it's going to, there we go. So it made the API call, and it got back the list of items from the API. So they are all right there. So let's choose underwater basket weaving, and we will import that to our database. So again, we don't have a way to go back to the question situation, but what we can do is we can stop this, and we can recomment these out. And so now when we restart this, so now when we restart it, it's our normal app. And we should see the underwater basket weaving questions that have been added to the database. So I'll be back when this is up and running. Okay, so it's back up and running, and as you can see, it added underwater basket weaving, and we have that question. It is an interesting subject. So again, this is a nice introduction to using Volley. Like I said, in my own personal Android application, I use the Retrofit, and I will pull that up here for you. Give me a minute. Okay, so my application's up and available here. So again, I want to share with you my Retrofit implementation. So Retrofit uses a API interface. So if I expand out these, let me find API interface. Here we go. So from Retrofit, it provides ways to do gets, posts, and so forth. And so as you can see, I've created a Git manager. So rather than having this code copied and pasted, I have one single manager, and I create a Git instance method for the singleton. And eventually, I might want things like the training types for my application. And so I have a service. So in Retrofit, you create a service that is going to implement all the details of the API interface. And from it, I can then just simply call the interface methods here. And then you can see that I'm providing callbacks that it will then send the information to. So Retrofit, a little bit more setup potentially, but again, I went with this implementation. So you could either use Retrofit or Volley. They both work pretty well. All right, that's going to be it for the API implementations.